Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from round 2 of the 2023 Qatar Masters. On the white end, Alisher Suleymenov playing against Magnus Carlsen. So let me first begin with the elephant in the room. Carlsen's opponent wore an analog watch during this game, and that rattled him. Sparked a big discussion. Here are some of the tweets that helped to tell the story. I think what MVL had to say is on point. If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, read up on this all you want. My main focus in this video is going to simply be on the chess. Okay, this game begins with d4, and the opening we work with b6, Queen's Indian defense. a3, Petrosian variation, no bishop b4 check. Carlsen put some pressure on c4. Defended. And Black says, mission accomplished. I got what I wanted. This little finesse with the bishop has pulled the queen away from supporting a d5 advance. That's not to say d5 still can't be played. It could still be played as a gambit. All right. Knight c3, c5, e4. Do you see the threat? It's a positional one. Given time, white would like to next play d5, form a little triangle, and have the bishop bite on a rock. Black is well aware of this, timely, breaks up the pawn trio. Only after the structure has been addressed does Black continue to develop. Knight f3. Okay. The follow-up is knight c6. A question I had for myself is, what happens if Black goes after f2? Or in other words, what's happening after knight g4? How to defend? You might think, well, I could drop my knight back here. You don't have to run in reverse, though. A good move for white in this position is bishop g5, hitting the queen, and after f6, the bishop is there in time. There is a more sophisticated variation, and that is to capture on f2 right now. This is not a good path for Black. How would this one play out? We would end up with a queen exchange, and white is down the exchange. However, this guy is cornered, and in time, white is going to win the knight. Soon we're going to have a 2 minor pieces versus rook imbalance. Very good for white. So, in this game, it is simply more development. Space for white on the queen side with tempo. The reply, bishop e7. What's very important to note is that if Black instead drops the knight into d4, don't take the knight. If white takes the knight on d4, the bishop would be invited to an excellent diagonal. There's all of a sudden a pin. There's a problem on e4. f3 has its own issues. Knight h5, queen h4 with check. Okay, how should white play if knight d4? Move the queen right away. Not with the intention to meet knight takes knight with queen takes knight, because the bishop would be able to get to d4. The idea is to take on the doubled f pawns and look at this g7 square. There's some coordinated pressure here, and queenside castles is right around the corner. A very lively position ahead, to be sure. Okay. In this game, bishop e7, bishop b2. Black's queen has an eye on the e5 push. She's working from afar. Going to c7 is asking for trouble. All right, rook d1. Black castles. And the follow-up is bishop to e2. e5 is close to maybe working as a pawn sacrifice, but do know if you play e5 right now, after these captures, the queen gets to take with check. I bring this up, this variation up, because once bishop to e2 is in there, this becomes a thing. If the queen isn't able to get here with check, there's a trick for white. Now in the game it is d6. If instead h6 is played, this is where we could see e5 working. If the knight moves, the pawn falls. And if you take here, this is where there's no longer a check, and white has time for this winning shot. Knight d5. The queen is hit, bishop is hit. Queen d6 is met with knight takes knight check, and the queen would fall. Okay, simple defense after bishop e2. Small pawn center. No e5 to worry about. Okay, castles, rook c8. What is a thought or two? What's an initial thought or two you have when you see rook to c8? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, maybe give this one 30 seconds. Okay, I'm just going to share some of my own thoughts. My initial thoughts when I see rook c8 on a half open file. And the queen. There's some kind of a pin going on. The queen probably doesn't feel so comfortable opposite the rook. Here's something more you can think about once that king-rook has made a move. At the start of a chess game, the weakest square is f7. Given some development, it goes from a weakened square to a strengthened square. Right, once castles is in there, the rook is defending f7. But then a little bit later on, like right here, move 14, that king-rook has moved. f7 is back to a weak square. That's a natural progression in the game. It goes from weak, strengthened, back to weak. There's clearly something that's going to happen in this game on f7. Anyhow, I think it's helpful to recognize that little progression there. Okay, coming up, rook f to e1. Last piece is activated, central here. Some regrouping going on. These next two moves by black and white. The follow-up, knight e7. The suggestion by the engine is to go forward, kind of clog up the e-file, be okay, in other words, taking on these doubled pawns. Why doesn't Carlsen maybe play in this way? It does give white a majority on the queen side. A much more static position ahead, probably wanted to keep it a bit more lively. All right, he goes with knight to e7. Both bishop and rook are unmasked. This is a window of opportunity for white. This is vulnerable now. White goes after it with knight to b5 and opens up the bishop's eyes. So how to defend d6? In the game, the knight goes back to e8. What's considered best is to move this knight, allow the bishop to defend. But if you play in this way, you're okay with taking on doubled f-pawns. Carlsen was clearly not welcome to that. So what does he play in this position? He drops the knight back to e8. So these guys continue to compete with one another. You'll notice when they're on these two squares, competing for these two center points. And this move here, black mimics it, goes to e8. And yet again, they continue to fight for these same squares. Okay. Who benefits with these last two moves? Knight b5, knight e8. It's clearly white. White's moving forward, black's running in reverse. Okay, white has promoted a piece, black has demoted a piece. We continue now. In comes another knight move. Knight g5 creates there's some tactics now right around the corner. We can see pressure on f7 and h7. We might now start to think about these 2 points as unprotected. One attacker, one defender on each point. Actually, there's a third, now that I look at it. 3 unprotected points. A lot of pressure with this one move. Also notice the queen. She's sandwiched between the black rooks. She has no moves at all currently. Right around the corner for white is this idea to push e5, and there'd already be a mate threat. Okay, this is one of the downsides with retreating the knight. There's this sensitivity now on the h7 square. In the game, knight g6 is played. However, what's important to note is that if the knight is given a kick on this move 18, that would follow knight takes f7, and then e5, and 2 things are happening. 1, there's pressure on d6 3 times, and if that's defended with, let's say, d5, trying to close the position, white also would have this quiet deadly queen h7, which cuts off the king from returning to safe ground. And this would buy white time to swarm in on the attack. One, for instance, bishop e2, bishop h5. Completely crushing. We continue in this game with knight g6. The follow-up, e5. So this is an excellent follow-up here. In fact, after knight g5, this was already considered a winning move. Move 18, knight g5. What's going on here? Well, here's the simplest one to look at. Knight takes pawn would be game over. What other options are there? In the game, d5 is played. If you take on e5, this is very painful. The queen's toast. She doesn't have a square. You have to block with the knight. Okay, completely winning for white. Same story here. Take the bishop, winning the king. So in this game, it is d5. Queen b3, out of the pin. We continue bishop to e7. Instead of bishop e7, if h6, the follow-up would be the same. And that is knight takes f7. Winning shot here. King takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. And what do you try in this position? The follow-up is bishop takes pawn. If you try to attack the knight can hop into d6. Some capture on that square. White would still have a pick. You could take in either direction. The position is opening up for these two cannons. Right in the center. Look at these guys. Not doing anything. This position is officially broken down. What is played? Bishop takes on d5. That's not going to hold up. The rook takes bishop. With this sequence, with this position, we now have a two pawns versus rook imbalance. But how good is this rook? Doesn't even have a move. Check on board. Only one reply, king f8. The queen and knight, a killer combo. White is pouncing now on the light squares. Big threat with knight e6. How do you deal with that? In the game, it's knight f4. What other tries are there here? If, let's say, the bishop goes to h4 or e8, preparing to meet a check with king to e7. Well, first of all, this isn't a stable square. You could always give the bishop a kick. Let's say the bishop is on this square. Here's how you can continue. A check, and regardless of where the king goes, knight g5 is crushing. Let's stay off of this diagonal. King here, knight here. How are you stopping this? Knight in the corner. This is beginning to look like Fischer random chess. This would be mate in two. Check, checkmate. Okay, what other variation is worth noting here? Again, the move in the game, knight f4. If you try knight c7, this doesn't work. It hits the queen and defends knight e6, but white would have queen f3 check. And what are black's options? If the king goes back home, white could continue to build up the pressure. Bishop c4, looking at this. If you try to defend with knight h8, there's knight f5. All the white pieces are swarming in. There is no defense. And what would happen if the king went to the castled square, g8? Well, now would come knight c6, hitting the queen. Any counterpunch against white's queen with rook f8 or knight h4 can both be met with queen b3 check, and then the black queen would fall. What's the problem after queen b7? Knight takes bishop check, and the queen would be won next. So, this is not working. What's tried? Knight f4, queen f3, knight is pinned, no saving it. g5, there's g3. Carlsen makes a run for it. Now we're not even As white's not even down material at this stage. It's a light square bishop and 2 pawns for the rook. But again, how good is that rook? All right, this one finishes up quickly, a 31 move game. Queen b7, knight f5, paves the way for bishop c4 check. b5, the queen is now overloaded. Has to watch over the pawn and bishop. White can simply take on b5, does take on b5. The bishop is poisoned. Queen takes bishop would be met with knight takes bishop check. King in the corner, queen f8, mate. So on this one, it's bishop f8, bishop c4 check, king h8, final move of this game, knight h6, black resigns. What's happening here? We have a mate in 1 threat. How do you deal with that? If you play queen e7, this is considered the best try, but it's still completely losing. White could continue with a check and even take some time out to tuck the bishop away, and you could wait to deliver a discovered check. If, let's say, a5 in this position, there's knight g5 discovered check and even a sacrifice on h7, looking to next go for a rook lift. There is no defense to this play. Anything else? Here's a fun one. If bishop to e7, white could play queen f7, and how does black stop queen g8? Mate. With the knight move, everybody would love to see this one. Queen g8 followed up with knight f7 for a smothered mate. Simply no defense after knight h6. What did you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.